Hey, what if from every listing you take, you received 5 transactional sides? Imagine that. Imagine you take 10 listings in the next 12 months and that leads to 50 transactional sides. Is it possible? Absolutely. And more importantly, we have to look at what we've done in the last 12 months. The last 12 months, how many listings did we take and how many sides did we create? If we are leaving money on the table, it's probably coming from the activities that we're not doing when it regards to our listings, and those opportunities are so massive. So we have a system which I call the 5-star listing system, and it identifies the 5 easy transactions we can secure from every single listing we take. So let's look at this. Number 1, which is not surprising, is we're going to sell the listing that we take. Now that sounds simple in today's market. 95% of listings are selling as soon as they hit the market. But as the market transitions, as the market shifts, believe me, we're going to need to be able to refine our presentations and make sure we get saleable listings again. Because some sellers are starting to outrun the market. They're overpricing their properties. Real danger in our current market. So we need to have this conversation. And conversations and scripting is so important when we're having conversations with sellers. So here we go. We're going to say, hey, because 95% of buyers are connected to a portal, what that means is when we put your house in the market, within 24 hours, basically every buyer in the market is going to turn and look at your listing. Because people are connected to Realtor.com and Zillow.com and my website, my company's website, everybody gets emails as new listings hit the market. And when they see a listing that hits the market, they're going to turn a look at it. So within the first 24 hours, everybody takes a hard look at your listing, and they decide as a collective group, is it priced right or is it overpriced? And if the market believes it's overpriced, everybody's going to turn away from you and wait for the next listing to come online. If they believe it's priced right, you're going to get a surge of showings and probably offers. So the lesson here is we don't get a second bite at the apple. We have one shot at a first impression. So really what we have to do today is decide, do we want to list the property and get it on the market, or do we want to sell the property? Whole different conversations when we decide which route we're headed. Now there is a neighbor of yours, you probably have noticed it, that we drive by every morning, and that neighbor of yours has had their home on the market for over 30 days, and I can tell you right now, they listed it, they didn't want to sell it because it's vastly overpriced. Have you noticed that one? And get into conversation about that. So that's one part of this, is just selling that first property. The next one is going to be obtaining a triggered listing. Now a triggered listing is when a listing sign goes up in a neighborhood and the homeowners around that listing are driving home, they're going to notice the new sign. They're going to start to talk about it with their spouse or significant other. Hey, did you see Bob and Judy listed their house? Let's look at what it's listed for. They'll go on to Zillow or Realtor.com. They'll see what it's listed for. Oh, our house is worth more than that. They'll start triggering them to start having a conversation about selling. This is why more signs will often go up in that neighborhood. My neighborhood, in the last year or two, we've had 7, 8 signs go up from all kinds of different realtors as these listings have been triggered. Probably same thing has happened in your neighborhood as well. Now, what's interesting when you look at that is it's often not with the same listing agents. It's often with different agents that are listing these homes. Why? Because the first agent who took a listing didn't use the trigger effect. They didn't canvass the neighborhood after they took the listing. We need to canvass the neighborhood. Every time we take a listing, we should be doing a boost in social media, geographically around the listing. We should be making calls, sending texts, doing mailings, doing in-person conversations, doing open houses in those neighborhoods, and making sure that people know if they want to talk about real estate, they should talk to us. So that's obtaining a trigger listing. Next is we want to convert a buyer and or a seller. And here's what's happening in our current market. When agents get calls on the listings, they're like, ugh, another buyer, I don't want to deal with it. Ugh, and they're so jaded about buyers. They forget that 72% of those buyer calls are sellers in disguise, people that still need to sell their house. So every single call that we get, we're always going to ask the question, hey, while I got you on the phone, can I ask you, what's your housing situation now? Always find out, do they own a home, do they rent a home? Figure it out, right? And then figure out your script. In order to get really better at converting buyers and sellers on the phone, we should be using a script until it's memorized and it becomes part of our second nature. We should be tracking our results and we should be measuring our performance. See how many calls per appointments that we average. The other thing is we have to get really good at scripting. So we might say, hey, well, thanks for reaching out about this listing. What clicked with you about this particular house? Or, hey, do you have a specific area in mind? Or, hey, how many bedrooms and bathrooms really feels right for you? Now, do you need a big yard, small yard? What are you looking for? What are you thinking about square footage? Hey, do you own a home now? You see, I'm going to memorize those scripts and get into conversations with people. Last thing I want to talk about is that we should always be turning a seller into a buyer. This is number 5, turning a seller into a buyer. Obviously, when people sell the house, they got to move. Where are they moving to? This is where agents fall apart. A lot of agents will do this. They'll go out, take a listing, super excited, get the client to sign, they bring an offer in, they get excited, they get into escrow. Then they call the seller a couple weeks later, and the seller says, hey, good news, we found another home. We're in escrow on it. And the agent's like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, we're in escrow. We found an agent went to an open house. See, that's where we fall apart because we didn't treat them as a buyer. The first thing we should do when we start talking to sellers is treat them as buyers before all else. So my conversation is, hey, before we talk about this home that we're going to sell, let's talk about your next home you're going to buy. I treat them as a buyer from day one, step one, the first thing we should do. Because your most motivated seller in the world is somebody that knows where they're going. The least motivated seller in the world is a person who has no idea where they're going, right? We've got to solve that, take control of it. Even if they're relocating to another area, we should be referring them on to another agent.